This talk is based on a chapter in progress that I am writing in relation to a book entitled White Riot, and it's a book that is approaching the 1907 anti-Asian riot in Vancouver from a number of different perspectives, aesthetic perspectives, social and political perspectives, and I believe that the book is coming out next year from Arsenal Pulp Press. But what I want to do in this talk is to introduce you to the work 360 Riot Walk, both thematically and formally. I think the formal elements of this kind of work often get lost, and I want to draw some attention to the very deliberate decisions that were made by the creators to engage participants in the tour. And then I want to also explore some of the issues that the work raises with respect to both screen representation and embodied and immersive experiences. So this is part of a larger interest that I'm developing around digital media and questions of interactivity, questions of immersive experience, and how they might be approached in a way that engages more directly with the identities of marginalized individuals and groups. I often find that with certain philosophical approaches to digitalization, there's a tendency to forget about how bodies are situated in time and space, and this is very much something that 360 Riot Walk is trying to encourage participants to engage with. Okay, so what I want to do first is to play a very short promo video of the Riot Walk to give you a sense of the experience that it's trying to create. It's under a minute, so please bear with me.
This powerful $99 drone is now available in Canada. This is an extremely high-tech $5,000 drone.
I remember that from yesterday.
Yeah, autoplay is still on.
Okay, how do I get into presenter view?
Just the play button.
Thank you. Okay, so what you just saw was the in-person tour. There is a version that you can actually take on location. The work is conceived as a site-specific activity, and I will talk more about that. But there is also a version that you can take strictly online. Whether or not you are taking it, the tour, on location or in your own home or with a device that you have elsewhere, you'll still be interfacing with the website. I may have a couple of extra slides in this presentation, so please, I apologize for that in advance. Please bear with me. Okay, so 360 Riot Walk is an interactive walking tour of the 1907 anti-Asian riots in Vancouver. It utilizes 360 video technology to trace the history and route of a mob which attacked the city's Chinese Canadian and Japanese Canadian communities following a demonstration and parade organized by the Asiatic Exclusion League in Vancouver. The Asiatic Exclusion League was a labor organization, and just to situate these events at the turn of the century, Vancouver would have been guided by official policy that was whites only. It was very much a colonial policy in terms of trying to recreate Vancouver in the model of British society. So what the 360 Riot Walk attempts to do is to, on location, follow the route of the riot as it took place, narrate the community's responses to the event, but also to reflect on how these specific sites have changed from the turn of the century to the present day. And one of the themes that's very important to the 360 Riot Walk is this sense that the communities, Japanese Canadian, Chinese Canadian communities that were attacked in 1907 are similarly under threat today through processes of gentrification. And that's something that I know came up in the talks yesterday. And so I'm going to mention how the work engages with that issue as well. Okay. So the 360 Riot Walk was created by artist and educator Henry Jang and a team of staff and students at Emily Carr University of Art and Design as an aesthetic response to this largely unacknowledged event in the city's history. The walk was launched in 2019, and it follows on from Henry Jang's earlier works, one called The Unwelcome Dinner and another in 2018 called Riot Food Now. And that was an attempt to situate participants in life and culture in at the turn of the century through the medium of food and through the embodied experience of eating culturally specific foods from racialized communities in 1907. So this approach of creating historical consciousness through an experience that is through experiential means and through an embodied experience is very much part of Henry's is important to Henry's practice. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the formal properties of 360 Riot Walk. Aesthetically, 360 Riot Walk adopts the visual strategy of rephotography, as well as colorization of archival images. And rephotography, which many of you may be familiar with in other iterations, is the production of a composite photo from two or more photos that have been blended together. One of the photos is often archival, the other photo is contemporary, and the juxtaposition of those two images is meant to create a sense of the uncanny and also a sense of historical reflection. So you can see in this image the damage to property, to the buildings in Japantown caused by the rioters. And the artist made a deliberate decision to render the archival images in color and contemporary images of the site in black and white. So I'll talk a bit about colorization in a couple of slides, but I also want to mention that, sorry, I'll go back. Maybe I won't. Okay, I'll stick here to colorization. Okay, so this is an example of an image that would have popped up along one of the tour stops of a Cantonese opera theatre that no longer exists at a theatre. Usually, if you were go to the public archive, you might see an image like this in black and white. What I want to do is to also relate 360 Riot work and this particular aesthetic strategy to some other case studies of colorization, as well as the phenomenon of community organizations, artists, activists using new media to achieve social justice ends. Okay, so I'm going to talk about colorization again in a moment, but these are two images from work by the Chinatown Art Brigade. They are based in New York City, but their objectives are similar to Henry and his team in terms of creating activities that will engage the public around issues of heritage preservation and also political issues around access to affordable housing, anti-racism, and the role of art in the communities that are being gentrified. So they do projection mapping. They also are, let me just read here. This is a project called Home to Stay, Housing for People Mapping Project, and it's a collaborative critical mapping project centering on placekeeping efforts in Chinatown and the Lower East Side. The project featured short video and audio testimonials from Chinatown and Lower East Side residents who are directly impacted by displacement. And the Chinatown Art Brigade trained tenants in the new media technologies of augmented reality and 360 video. And these technologies were explicitly used to create and preserve stories for future walking tours and virtual tours. Okay, this is just another example of the kind of public-facing work that they're doing in order to publicly protest around what is happening in the neighborhood. They've also been very active in terms of responding to the resurgence of anti-Asian racism since the pandemic. Okay, so just another case study. So I mentioned colorization, and there's two cases that I want to situate 360 Riot Walk in relation to as well. This idea of using color to re-engage the public with the archive, with history, is something that was taken up recently by a film called They Shall Not Grow Old. They Shall Not Grow Old is a nonfiction feature film by filmmaker Peter Jackson, which was commissioned by the Imperial War Museum in London and 1418 Now, in association with the BBC, in order to mark the centenary of the armistice of the First World War. It premiered at the London Film Festival in 2018 and was subsequently released theatrically in 25 markets, as well as being broadcast by the CBC. So you can see what the filmmaker is trying to achieve here. And although financially successful and widely praised by mainstream film critics, They Shall Not Grow Old has been problematized by a number of observers and scholars in relation to different issues. So there's a group of scholars that have objected to the colorization, the fact that he added sound, the fact that he does not show the impact of the conflict on recording technologies at that time. So there are objections based on preservation, authenticity, and authorship. But there are also scholars that have problematized this kind of strategy on the basis that the kind of experience that it really centers is the experience of a group of British soldiers of a particular race and of a particular, well, gender. So this is another work that speaks to, I think, some of these issues around historical memory, heritage preservation, and also race. So this is an image from Mimesis, African Soldier, a multi-screen installation by artist John Comfrey, and he's pictured there, showing, it showed at the Imperial War Museum. It was also part of commemorative efforts around the World War I in 2018. And it remembers the millions of African men and women who participated in the First World War, either as soldiers or carriers. Between 1914 and 1918, millions of African soldiers served in long colonial campaigns that spanned the whole of the African continent, contributing to victories throughout World War I. And in addition to this fighting, African soldiers from British, French, Dutch African territories were brought to Europe's Western Front, where they lost their lives. So John Comfrey, through this work, is really trying to use this strategy of colorization, but also of sort of reanimating the archive in order to tell a story that people may not actually be familiar with. Okay, so these are a couple more images that you've seen through the video. So in terms of the issues that I think the work raises, one is this issue of representation and what happens to representation when there is a shift in emphasis by creators to senses, promoting sensory experience that is not visual. What I want to argue is that even though there may be more interest now in creating experiences for audiences that are about touch or smell or taste, there needs to be a reflection and acknowledgement that people, different people inhabit bodies differently and move through the world differently based on historical conditions, based on social relations. And the other main issue that I think the work engages with as a site-specific work is the experience of participants who are taking the tour in person, who are walking, retracing this route of the riot through Chinatown, through what was before the Japanese-Canadian internment, the historic home of the Japanese-Canadian community, but also through the downtown east side in Vancouver, which has issues surrounding, it's a community with many issues related to poverty and addiction and displacement because the city doesn't want to deal with homelessness. So I think the experience of walking the tour really creates an experience for participants. And I took the tour about a year ago where you can't not think about these issues of gentrification. You can't not think about these issues of homelessness and poverty because it's something that you are experiencing alongside with the work. This of course raises ethical issues, and it also raises issues of how work by racialized artists living in particular communities in the city is going to continue to be made given these conditions of gentrification and commercialization of property. So I think I will wrap up there, but thank you very much for listening, and looking forward to your questions and comments.